People whispered in hushed tones behind closed doors and typed in bitter online forums that she simply could not satisfy him in bed. They claimed that as a wife, she was too focused on her grueling career as a physical therapy professor, too consumed by raising their 2 young toddlers, and too exhausted by her 3rd pregnancy to give her husband the intimacy he felt entitled to receive. The rumor mill insisted that this alleged failure in the bedroom was the sole reason her husband sought comfort in the arms of another woman across the country, and ultimately, the reason she ended up dead on her bedroom floor. But is that really the truth? Did a devoted mother of 2, 9 weeks pregnant with her 3rd child, lose her life because of a marital failure in the bedroom? Or is that malicious rumor just a convenient, cowardly lie concocted to shift the blame onto a woman who is no longer here to defend herself? When you peel back the layers of internet gossip and examine the hard forensic evidence, you discover that Christa Bauer Gilley was not a failing wife. She was a brilliant, selfless woman, trapped in a home with a man leading a cold, calculated double life. A man who preferred murder, fake passports, and an international flight to Italy over facing a divorce court. Welcome back to Brian's Criminal Unmasking, the space where we pull back the curtain on the darkest human motives and dismantle the lies people tell to cover their tracks. If you believe that true crime stories should uncover the raw, unvarnished truth without sugarcoating the actions of ruthless killers, take a moment right now to smash that like button. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel with all notifications turned on so you never miss an episode where we unmask the truth behind the headlines. To truly understand the tragic ending of Christa Bauer Gilley on the night of October 7, 2024, you cannot begin in the master bedroom of her upscale Houston home. You have to travel all the way across the United States to California, to the secret world her husband, Lee Mongerson Gilley, was carefully constructing in the shadows. Long before emergency sirens ever echoed down Olston Street, Lee Gilley was already living a double life. Prosecutors would later reveal in official court filings that as early as 2023, while Christa was busy managing her demanding hospital job, mentoring university students, and caring for their 2 small toddlers, Lee was quietly engaged in a passionate extramarital affair with a woman living in California. This was not a fleeting lapse in judgment or a momentary temptation. It was an ongoing, deeply entrenched secret relationship that spanned months and months. While Lee presented himself to his neighbors in the wealthy Houston Heights district as a respectable 38-year-old self-employed software consultant, his phone was buzzing with encrypted messages, secret calls, and private photo exchanges. He was telling another woman that he loved her. He was painting a picture of a future where he was free from his domestic obligations, free from his marriage, and free to start a brand new life on the West Coast. As 2023 turned into 2024, the divide between Lee's reality and his fantasy widened into a dangerous chasm. His wife, Christa, was a woman of immense talent and boundless energy, a woman whose life was centered around healing others and building a loving home for her family. Born on February 7, 1986 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Christa was the eldest of 4 daughters. From her earliest childhood days, her parents, Sharon and Christopher Bauer, recognized that Christa possessed a natural, almost supernatural instinct to care for those around her. She was the classic eldest sister, protective, warm, fiercely intelligent, and endlessly generous. She excelled academically, earning her undergraduate degree from Clemson University, where she joined the Alpha Chi Omega sorority and became a lifelong passionate fan of Clemson Tiger football. She went on to earn her doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Pittsburgh, achieving board certification as a clinical specialist in cardiovascular and pulmonary rehabilitation. When she moved to Houston, Texas in 2014, she secured what her colleagues referred to as her absolute dream job at Memorial Hermann Hospital in the renowned Texas Medical Center. In the high-intensity units of the hospital, Christa worked with the sickest patients imaginable, people with failing hearts, damaged lungs, and severe physical trauma. She did not just treat their physical conditions. She held their hands through their darkest moments, developed cutting-edge mobility protocols, and brought light into rooms shadowed by illness. She later shared her vast expertise as an adjunct professor at both the University of Texas Medical Branch and the University of Pittsburgh, mentoring the next generation of medical professionals with the exact same fierce dedication she brought to her clinical practice. To those who watched her work, Christa was a force of nature. She adopted a golden retriever named Riggs, whom she affectionately called her first child, and served as the president of the Houston Clemson Club, hosting lively game day watch parties where her contagious laughter filled the room. When she rekindled her friendship with Lee Gilley, a man she had known socially for nearly a decade, their relationship escalated rapidly. They seemed to complement each other, the brilliant, outgoing physical therapist and the quiet, tech-savvy software consultant. They married on January 28, 2017, and within a few years they welcomed two beautiful toddlers into their lives. By the autumn of 2024, Christa was brimming with joy because she was 9 weeks pregnant with their third child. On the surface, the Gilley family was the embodiment of the suburban American dream. They lived in a beautiful home on Olston Street in the Houston Heights, an affluent neighborhood just 4 miles northwest of downtown Houston, known for its historic charm and tree-lined streets. Neighbors saw a successful couple pushing strollers down the sidewalk, walking their golden retriever, and preparing for the arrival of a new baby. But behind those closed doors, the atmosphere was suffocating. While Christa was managing her pregnancy, teaching classes, treating critical patients, and raising 2 toddlers, Lee was drowning in resentment. The rumors that Christa was unable to satisfy him were nothing more than a narrative built to justify his own betrayal. The truth was far simpler and far darker. Lee Gilley did not want to be a husband anymore. He did not want the financial burden of a third child. He did not want to go through a costly public divorce that would divide his assets, force him to pay child support, and expose his long-term affair to his family and community. In his mind, divorce was a messy, expensive defeat. He wanted a clean break, a total escape, and he wanted it on his own terms. As Christa's pregnancy progressed into its 2nd month, Lee's communications with his mistress in California became increasingly urgent. He was trapped between the life he was living in Houston and the fantasy life he was planning across the country. In cases of intimate partner violence, criminologists routinely note that the period of pregnancy is one of the most dangerous times in a woman's life. The impending arrival of a child creates a permanent, irreversible bond that an abusive or detached partner cannot easily sever. For Lee Gilley, time was running out. He had to make a choice: confess his affair and face a devastating divorce, or eliminate the obstacle standing between him and his freedom. On the evening of Monday, October 7th, 2024, inside the home on Olston Street, the friction between Lee and Christa reached a boiling point. The 2 toddlers were tucked into their beds down the hall, fast asleep, completely unaware of the storm brewing in the house. Christa, exhausted from her work at the hospital and the early stages of her pregnancy, went to bed. She had no idea that her husband had already decided she was not going to wake up the next morning. At approximately 11:30 that night, a phone call rang into the Houston Emergency Dispatch Center. The voice on the line belonged to Lee Gilley. He sounded frantic, breathless, and distressed. He told the operator that his wife was unresponsive in their bedroom. When the dispatcher asked what had happened, Lee offered his first official narrative of the evening. He claimed that Christa had suffered a drug overdose. He told the operator that he was currently attempting to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation on her lifeless body. Emergency medical personnel from the Houston Fire Department rushed to the scene on Olston Street. They found 38-year-old Christa lying motionless. Paramedics worked desperately to revive her, loading her into an ambulance and rushing her to Memorial Hermann Greater Heights Hospital, the very hospital system where Christa had dedicated so much of her career to saving others. Meanwhile, Houston police officers arrived at the home to secure the scene, finding the two small toddlers still sleeping in their rooms. Approximately 3 hours after arriving at the emergency room, Christa Bauer Gilley was officially pronounced dead. She was 38 years old, 9 weeks pregnant, and her life was over. But as hospital medical staff examined her body, the story Lee Gilley had told the 911 operator began to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Experienced ER nurses and doctors immediately saw signs that made their stomachs turn. There was distinct, dark bruising blossoming across Christa's face. More critically, there was clear, unmistakable blunt trauma surrounding her neck and upper chest. These were not the clinical marks of an accidental drug overdose or a medical emergency. These were the violent, undeniable imprints of a physical struggle. The hospital staff immediately notified the Houston Police Department Homicide Division. On October 9, 2024, the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences completed a thorough autopsy on Christa's body. The medical examiner's findings were brutal, definitive, and unambiguous. Christa Bauer Gilley had not died from an overdose of drugs. She had died from manual compression of the neck and upper back, strangulation. The manner of death was formally ruled a homicide. Furthermore, the autopsy confirmed that Christa was approximately 8 to 9 weeks pregnant with a healthy, developing fetus. Under Texas law, her death was not just a single murder, it was a double homicide. Armed with the autopsy results, homicide detectives brought Lee Gilley back into an interrogation room. They presented him with the medical examiner's findings, showing him the evidence that proved Christa had been strangled to death. Under the weight of the physical evidence, Lee's initial story collapsed completely. He abandoned the drug overdose narrative. He admitted to detectives that Christa was not a drug user, and he acknowledged that she had never expressed suicidal thoughts. He then tried to construct a second, revised version of events. He admitted that he and Christa had engaged in a bitter argument earlier that evening. He claimed that after the argument, he went to sleep, and when he woke up later in the night, he simply found her unconscious on the floor. But detectives were not buying it. As forensic experts know all too well, a person does not suffer neck compression and facial bruising in their sleep. A person cannot strangle themselves to death without leaving defensive marks. The physical evidence proved that someone had placed their hands around Christa's neck and applied crushing pressure until her heart stopped beating. And the only other adult present in that house on the night of October 7th was Lee Mongerson Gilley. On October 11th, 2024, 4 days after Christa's murder, an arrest warrant was officially issued for Lee Gilley on charges of capital murder. The capital charge reflected the fact that his actions resulted in the death of 2 human beings, his wife, Christa, and their unborn child. Under the Texas Penal Code, a conviction for capital murder carries only 2 possible sentences: life in prison without the possibility of parole, or the death penalty. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this shocking story of betrayal, murder, and an international manhunt. Lee Gilley was taken into custody and booked into the Harris County Jail. What followed was a highly contentious bond hearing that left Christa's family and the Houston community in state of total shock. Prosecutors argued passionately that Lee should be held on a $3 million bond, pointing out that he had the financial resources, the technical skills, and a strong motive to flee the jurisdiction. His defense attorneys pushed back aggressively, requesting a much lower bond of $200,000. The judge ultimately set his bond at $1 million. To the horror of Christa's grieving parents, Sharon and Christopher Bauer, Lee managed to secure the financial backing to post the $1 million bond. He walked out of the Harris County Jail, placed under court-ordered conditions that required him to wear a global positioning system ankle monitor, stay at least 200 feet away from his former home on Olston Street, and refrain from having any contact whatsoever with his 2 young children. The two toddlers were formally placed into the loving custody of their grandparents, Sharon and Christopher, who were forced to navigate the crushing grief of losing their daughter while stepping in to raise her motherless children. As Lee Gilley waited for his trial date, living in the Houston area with an ankle monitor strapped to his leg, the legal system moved forward. Prosecutors began building an airtight case for the upcoming capital murder trial. As part of discovery, court filings revealed that the state intended to introduce extensive digital evidence, detailing Lee's long-standing extramarital affair with the woman in California. The state planned to show the jury that Lee was not a grieving husband who snapped during a tragic argument, but a man who had spent over a year calculating how to remove his wife from his life so he could pursue another woman. Meanwhile, Lee hired one of the most famous and formidable criminal defense attorneys in the state of Texas, Dick DeGuerin. DeGuerin was a legendary legal figure known nationally for representing high-profile clients like real estate heir Robert Durst and Branch Davidian leader David Koresh. DeGuerin went on television and gave confident interviews to major news outlets like People magazine. He declared publicly that his client was completely innocent and that they had prepared a groundbreaking medical defense for trial. DeGuerin claimed to the media that Christa had not been strangled at all. He argued that defense medical experts would prove Christa suffered from a rare, pre-existing medical condition known as hemoglobin anemia, whose physiological effects during pregnancy, he claimed, could create internal vascular changes that mirrored the physical signs of strangulation. It was a highly controversial, complex medical argument, and the defense team prepared to present it to a jury when the trial date was set for May 29, 2026, before Judge Peyton Peebles in the 497th District Court of Harris County. To the public, it appeared that Lee Gilley was standing his ground, preparing to fight the capital murder charges with a high-powered legal team. But behind the scenes, Lee was already executing a secret secondary plan. He had no intention of ever sitting in a Texas courtroom facing the death penalty. Despite the strict conditions of his release and the constant monitoring of his ankle device, prosecutors uncovered that during the spring of 2025 and into 2026, Lee had resumed active, secret communications with his mistress in California. Using encrypted messaging applications and burn phones, Lee was not discussing his defense strategy. He was discussing exit routes. He was researching countries that did not have extradition treaties with the United States. He was studying international border controls, forged travel documents, and foreign asylum laws. He was planning a vanishing act. On the evening of Friday, May 1st, 2026, just weeks before his capital murder trial was scheduled to begin, an automated electronic alert fired at the offices of Harris County Pretrial Services. Lee Gilley's global positioning system, Ankle Monitor, registered a strap tamper event. Pretrial officers immediately attempted to contact Lee by phone, but his device went straight to voicemail. The alert remained active throughout the entire weekend. By Monday morning, officers dispatched to his location confirmed the terrible reality. Lee had used a cutting tool to slice the ankle monitor clean off his body, leaving the dead electronic device behind. He was officially a fugitive from justice. News of Lee's escape sent massive shockwaves through the Harris County Courthouse and the Bauer family. Judge Peebles immediately revoked his $1 million bond and issued a sweeping felony arrest warrant. Federal law enforcement agencies, including the United States Marshals Service and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, were called in to track down the fleeing capital murder suspect. What investigators uncovered as they retraced his digital and physical footsteps was a cold, methodical escape plan that had been organized over the course of several months. Lee had not panicked and run blindly into the night. He had executed a step-by-step logistical strategy. He traveled from Texas north across the United States border into Canada. From Canada, using fake identification, he boarded an international Air Canada flight bound for Milan, Italy. He was not traveling as Lee Mongerson Gilley. He was carrying a meticulously forged Belgian passport and Belgian national identification cards under the false alias of Lejeune Jean-Luc Olivier. He believed that once his feet touched European soil, he would be home free. He believed he could slip into the crowds of Western Europe, assume his fake Belgian identity, and live out the rest of his life in peace, while his wife lay in a grave in Pennsylvania and his children grew up without a father. But his elaborate plan hit a massive wall at the Milan Malpensa airport. As Lee presented his forged Belgian identification to Italian border control officers, the experienced border guards instantly recognized subtle irregularities in the security features of the documents. They pulled the American traveler out of the line and escorted him into a secondary interrogation room for detailed questioning. As Italian officers pressed him on the authenticity of his Belgian passport, Lee realized the game was up. The false identity was not going to hold. In a dramatic shift, Lee abandoned his fake name. He looked the Italian border officers in the eye and revealed his true identity. He told them he was Lee Mongerson Gilley, an American citizen fleeing a capital murder prosecution in Texas. He claimed that he was being wrongfully prosecuted by the American justice system for the murder of his wife, and he formally declared that he was requesting political asylum in Italy. Italian authorities immediately placed him under arrest for entering the country using fraudulent travel documents and notified the United States Department of Justice. The news that a suspected American killer had cut his ankle monitor, flown across the Atlantic Ocean on a fake passport, and landed in an Italian detention center made international headlines. On May 11, 2026, Lee Gilley appeared inside a courtroom in Turin, Italy, before Court of Appeals Judge Marta Stirpos. He was dressed in casual jeans and a plain white t-shirt, accompanied by his newly appointed Italian defense attorney, Monica Grau. When Judge Stirpos formally asked Lee if he consented to be extradited back to the United States to face his capital murder charges in Texas, Lee spoke clearly into the record, "I do not consent." He then launched into an unprompted speech before the Italian court, attempting to portray himself as a victim of state persecution. "My wife is dead, and they wrongly blamed me," Lee stated to the judge. "That is why I no longer have faith in the justice system. I am innocent. I did not kill my wife. The only crime I committed was fleeing. I fled to avoid being killed." Lee explained to the Italian judge that he had specifically chosen Italy as his destination from the very beginning of his escape plan. He praised Italian culture and lifestyle, but his true legal calculation was far more sinister. Lee knew that Italy had abolished the death penalty and possessed some of the strictest international extradition protections in the world. He told the court that he believed he deserved a fresh start in a nation that respected human rights. Back in Houston, his high-powered defense attorney, Dick DeGuerin, was stunned by his client's actions. DeGuerin admitted to reporters that Lee's flight to Europe was a devastating blow to their legal strategy. "When you flee, it can be taken by a jury as direct consciousness of guilt," DeGuerin noted grimly. Shortly after the international arrest, 2 of Lee's 3 American defense attorneys filed sealed motions with the court to formally withdraw from representing him. What Lee Gilley understood all too well was that by fleeing to Italy, he had exploited a massive legal loophole in international law. The United States and Italy have maintained a formal bilateral extradition treaty since 1983. However, Article 9 of the Italian Constitution and the Italian Code of Criminal Procedure contain an absolute, non-negotiable legal bar. The Italian government will strictly refuse to extradite any human being to a country where they face the possibility of receiving the death penalty. Because Lee Gilley was indicted in Texas for capital murder, a charge that carries the death penalty, Italian courts could not legally surrender him to American authorities unless the United States government provided a binding, formal written guarantee that the death penalty would not be sought or imposed. The Italian Court of Appeals gave the United States Department of Justice a strict 45-day window to submit a formal extradition packet complete with official diplomatic assurances from the Harris County District Attorney's Office, pledging that the state of Texas would take the death penalty off the table. Without those explicit written guarantees, Italian law would require Lee's release from extradition custody. This created an agonizing legal stalemate for Christa's family. Texas prosecutors were forced to choose between waiving the death penalty against a man who strangled his pregnant wife and cut off his ankle monitor, or watching him walk free on the streets of Europe. Meanwhile, Italian prosecutors in Milan opened a separate criminal prosecution against Lee for entering their nation on forged Belgian documents, a charge that carried its own prison sentence in Italy, potentially delaying any return to the United States by years. As prosecutors, federal marshals, and international diplomats argued across 2 continents, Judge Peebles in Houston was forced to postpone the capital murder trial indefinitely. The justice that Christa's family had waited nearly 2 years to see was suddenly frozen in international red tape. For Sharon and Christopher Bauer, the grief of losing their eldest daughter was compounded by the ongoing nightmare of raising Christa's 2 small toddlers while her killer fought extradition from an Italian jail cell. Family friends launched a GoFundMe campaign that raised over $100,000 to help the Bauer family cover the staggering legal, travel, and childcare expenses required to protect the children and secure their future. During child custody hearings, the Bauer family's attorneys raised disturbing questions about whether Lee had received financial or logistical assistance from his family to orchestrate his multi-thousand-mile escape to Europe. Lee's brother, Matt Gilley, testified via video link from North Carolina, denying any involvement in the escape. He revealed that the last text message he ever received from Lee came on May 1st, the day the ankle monitor was cut. The message simply read, "Give hugs to the kids." The judge ruled decisively in favor of Christa's parents, granting them full permanent custody of the 2 children, ensuring that Lee Gilley would never have control over their lives again. When you strip away the international drama, the high-powered attorneys, the forged Belgian passports, and the legal battles in Turin, you are left with the undeniable truth of who Christa Bauer Gilley really was. She was not the failing, cold wife described in online rumors. She was not a woman who drove her husband away through a lack of intimacy. She was a brilliant 38-year-old doctor of physical therapy, a selfless teacher, a devoted daughter, a loving mother, and a woman who was 9 weeks pregnant with a new life. She dedicated her entire career to keeping fragile human hearts beating, only to have her own heart stopped by the very man who had sworn to love and protect her. Lee Gilley did not kill his wife because she failed him. He killed her because he was a coward who valued his own freedom and fantasy life over the lives of his wife and unborn child. He tried to frame her death as an overdose, then a suicide, then a tragic medical accident before cutting his monitor and fleeing halfway across the globe. As Lee Gilley sits inside an Italian holding facility, waiting for diplomats and judges to decide his fate, the world he left behind continues to remember Christa for the light she brought into every room she entered. Her story stands as a chilling reminder that the most dangerous threats often do not come from dark alleys or masked intruders, but from the person lying right next to you in the quiet of your own home. Thank you so much for watching this complete episode of Brian's Criminal Unmasking. If this deep dive into the tragic case of Christa Bauer Gilley opened your eyes to the truth behind the rumors, please take a moment right now to hit that like button, share this video on your social media, and subscribe to the channel for more unfiltered true crime breakdowns. What do you think about Lee's escape to Italy and the international legal fight surrounding the death penalty? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you in the next case.